Emma hadn't meant to cry. She'd promised herself that this day, this one day, would be about joy. No tears, no hospitals, just her and Margaret like it used to be. A perfect replica of that golden afternoon from 30 years ago. She stepped out of the cab with a flutter of nostalgia and anxiety twined in her chest. The park looked the same. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe the light tricked her memory into painting everything more warmly. The rusted gate creaked the same way it had in her dreams. A street musician leaned against a lamppost, lazily strumming a guitar. And then she heard it. The song. A slow, dreamy waltz that Emma hadn't heard in decades. Her breath caught. It was the same song that played during the carousel ride that day, her favorite day with her mother. She glanced at Margaret, seated in her wheelchair, a wool shawl wrapped tightly around her frail shoulders. Margaret's eyes were distant, but her fingers tapped in rhythm. "You remember this, don't you?" Emma whispered. Margaret gave no reply, but a tear slipped down her cheek. They moved slowly through the park, retracing old steps. The duck pond, the bench near the lilacs, the ice cream stand with the lemon swirl no one but Margaret ever liked. Emma bought 2 cones. Margaret licked hers with surprising vigor. "This is nice," Emma said quietly. Margaret gave a slow, distracted nod. "He's watching," she murmured. Emma froze. "What?" But Margaret had already turned away, watching a pair of children chase pigeons. Emma looked around, her heart thudding. Nothing but joggers, tourists, a dog walker. No one out of place. Trying to shake the chill, she pushed Margaret toward the carousel. It stood at the park center, its faded horses gleaming in the late afternoon sun, just like it had that day, down to the gold filigree and chipped paint on the zebra saddle. As they approached, the ride operator looked up and smiled. "Back again?" he said. Emma blinked. "I'm sorry? Your mother brings you every year, don't she? Been doing it a long time, always the same day." Emma turned sharply to Margaret. "What is he talking about?" Margaret's eyes locked with hers. They were suddenly very clear. "Let's ride," she said softly. Emma hesitated. She hadn't been on a carousel in years. But something about the moment felt too sacred to deny. Margaret chose the white horse with the blue feathers. Emma sat on the one beside her. The music started, that same song again, and the ride spun slowly, the wind tangling through Emma's hair. As they rounded the far side of the carousel, Margaret leaned toward her. "You weren't mine to begin with." Emma didn't register it at first. The words floated in the air, absurd and out of place, like lines from someone else's movie. "What?" she asked, laughing nervously. "What do you mean?" Margaret's eyes stayed locked on the horizon. "I took you. I had to." The ride ended. The music stopped. Emma felt suddenly cold, the summer air not quite reaching her skin. She helped her mother down in silence, her mind buzzing. They sat on a bench nearby. Emma stared at her melting cone. "You're confused. The doctors said, sometimes with the dementia." Margaret turned to her, lucid again. "I remember everything. That day, the original one, I made it perfect so you'd never question it. The park, the song, the ice cream, everything, while people were looking for you." Emma couldn't breathe. "What are you saying? That I was... what? Kidnapped?" Margaret smiled sadly. "No, saved." Emma stood abruptly, backing away from her mother. "This isn't funny, this is sick." "Look in my closet," Margaret whispered. "Behind the cedar box." That night, Emma sat in Margaret's old bedroom, the closet door yawning open before her. Her hands shook as she moved the box. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a rusted key. It fit a small metal box buried in the back of the closet. The lock clicked open. Inside, a scorched photograph. Emma as a baby, her hair shorter, curlier, her eyes wide and frightened. A corner of the photo was charred. Next to it, a warped birth certificate. The name had been partially burned away. And then the newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle. "Fire destroys rural orphanage. One infant unaccounted for." A circle drawn in red ink around the phrase. ER, female, age unknown. Emma stared at the clipping, her heart hammering. A gust of wind rattled the window. For a moment, she thought she saw a silhouette outside, a figure standing still in the moonlight, watching the house. By the time she crossed the room to look, it was gone. But something had begun, a thread pulled, and Emma couldn't stop now. Emma hadn't slept. She'd sat in Margaret's old armchair all night, the metal box resting in her lap like a coiled serpent. The photo, the burned birth certificate, the article, they whispered from the shadows, demanding answers. At dawn, Emma tiptoed into the kitchen, the floorboards groaning under her weight. Margaret was already awake, staring out the window, her tea untouched. The lucidity from yesterday seemed to have drained from her, replaced by that hazy, faraway look Emma had grown used to. Emma gently placed the photo on the table in front of her. "You said I wasn't yours," she said quietly. "Now I want the whole truth." Margaret blinked slowly. Her lips parted, then trembled. "I wasn't supposed to keep you." Emma's throat tightened. "What does that mean?" Margaret closed her eyes. "They were going to sell you. A man came to see me, years ago. Told me there were children being moved. Quietly. To families who could pay." Emma sat down slowly. "Who was he?" Margaret shook her head. "I never knew his real name, but he had the kind of smile that made you think you could trust him. Said the children were orphans no one would miss. I asked too many questions. Next thing I knew, they were threatening to cut me out completely." "Cut you out of what?" Emma demanded. Margaret looked up at her daughter. "I was part of something. A group. We did charity work. At least that's what I thought it was." Emma leaned forward, her voice trembling. "And you found me there? In that orphanage?" Margaret's voice cracked. "I found you in a barn, wrapped in wet blankets. The fire had already started. The others? They were locking doors. Laughing. Like it was some kind of purge." Emma's stomach turned. "I took you. Ran out the back. I didn't look back." Emma stood and paced the room. Her mother had just confessed to abducting her from a burning building and possibly a child trafficking operation, and all she could feel was confusion. "You have to give me something more," Emma said. "A name, a place, anything." Margaret stared blankly at her teacup. "There was a woman, Ruth Salazar. She helped me disappear with you. She said she'd create documents. A cover. But she died in the fire, or I think she did." Emma blinked. "Wait. You weren't alone?" "No," Margaret whispered. "I was never brave enough to do it alone." A shiver ran through Emma. "Why now?" she asked. "Why tell me this now?" Margaret's eyes locked with hers, clear again, like something had broken through the fog. "Because someone came by the other day, said your name, said it was time. That's how I knew they'd found us." Emma felt the floor drop out from under her. "Who?" But Margaret only looked away. That night, as Emma searched Margaret's room again, she found something else, hidden in the lining of an old purse, a second photograph. A group photo, Margaret in her 20s, standing beside a stone building, surrounded by people wearing matching gold pins shaped like a flame. Emma flipped the photo over. A handwritten caption, "Phoenix Retreat 1995. She recognized the stone building. It was the same one from the burned orphanage article. The pieces were beginning to form a shape, but it was one Emma didn't want to see. Suddenly her phone rang. A private number. Against her better judgment, she answered. A man's voice, low and cold. "You're stirring up things better left buried." Emma's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "You don't know who you are, and if you keep digging, you'll wish you never found out." The line went dead. Emma stood in the dark, trembling. Then she called a locksmith. Within the hour, she had every lock in the house changed. The next morning, Emma met with a retired journalist friend, hoping to trace the article's origin. He examined the scorched clipping and raised an eyebrow. "This was pulled from public archives," he said. "The article's been scrubbed. Online, microfilm, everything. Whoever wanted it gone had resources." Emma swallowed hard. "Can you trace who requested the deletion?" He nodded slowly. Might take a few days, but I'll try. As she left the meeting, Emma passed a parked black car with tinted windows. She thought nothing of it, until she noticed the identical car parked outside her house that night. They were watching her. Margaret had told the truth. But it was only the beginning. Emma sat in the library's dim microfilm room, the hum of the old reader machine drowning out her thoughts. The article Margaret had hidden in the box was gone from public record, just like the journalist said. But Emma had a copy now, a fragile yellowed clipping from a forgotten past, and every time she read it, new horrors unfolded. Fire destroys rural orphanage, one infant unaccounted for. The rest of the article was sparse. A fire had gutted the St. Elora Children's Refuge, a privately funded orphanage, deep in the countryside. 11 children had perished. The article mentioned one surviving infant, referred to only by initials, ER. No name, no photo, no follow-up. Emma ran a finger across the jagged scorch marks that licked the edges of the article. ER. It was almost too on the nose. Emma Rose? Emma Ruth? Or was that just Margaret's fabrication? She didn't know what was real anymore. She left the library with a growing ache behind her eyes. Outside, a warm breeze stirred the fallen leaves across the sidewalk. She paused, feeling watched again. The same sensation had been dogging her for days, since the phone call, since Margaret's confession, since that photo of the Phoenix retreat. As Emma turned the corner, her phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Against her better judgment, she answered. Emma? A woman's voice rasped. You don't know me, but I knew Margaret. I was her friend. Emma stopped cold in her tracks. Who is this? She told me you'd start asking questions. But I'm telling you to stop, for your own good. Did you work at the orphanage? Emma pressed. The line went quiet for a moment. I'm not the only one listening. Then a click. Emma stood frozen, pulse thudding in her ears. Who was she? Another ghost from Margaret's past? Or someone trying to cover their tracks? Back at the house, Emma returned to the scorched photo from the metal box. She examined it under a magnifying glass. In the corner, barely visible under the charring, was a logo stamped onto a baby blanket. A bird, wings outstretched, encircled in flames. It wasn't until she saw it that she remembered the necklace Margaret used to wear when Emma was a child, a golden pendant in the shape of a bird rising from fire. The Phoenix. Emma's stomach twisted. She grabbed the old group photo from Margaret's purse, the one labeled Phoenix Retreat 1995. In the background stood the same building from the article, the orphanage. The Phoenix Society and St. Elora were connected, and somehow, so was she. Later that night, while sorting through the closet for more clues, Emma stumbled upon an old photo album, tucked between outdated tax returns and a book of crossword puzzles. But this wasn't a family album. The first page was blank, save for a single Polaroid tucked into the plastic sleeve, a blurry shot of Emma as a toddler, standing beside a tall woman with short dark hair. It wasn't Margaret. The woman was holding Emma's hand, but her face was turned, caught mid-glance, expression tense. On the back, written in shaky pen, R.S. last known. R.S. Ruth Salazar. The woman Margaret claimed helped her disappear, the woman who was presumed dead in the orphanage fire. But now Emma had proof that Ruth had survived after the fire, which meant Margaret had lied again. Why? Emma studied the background of the photo. A street sign, half visible. She pulled out her laptop, zoomed in, and enhanced the image. Bellamy and 12th. It was a run-down part of town now, mostly warehouses and old storefronts. Emma drove there the next morning, adrenaline pushing her forward. She parked near the intersection, walking slowly, scanning every window. One building had a faded sign, Bellamy Hardware, closed. Beside it, an old community center with peeling paint. As Emma turned to head back, a flash of light caught her eye. A second-story window shuttered quickly. Someone had been watching. She didn't wait. She bolted up the crumbling fire escape, reaching the landing just as the window clicked shut. Inside, an empty hallway. Emma pounded on the door. I know you're in there. Are you Ruth Salazar? No answer. But behind the door she heard something drop, something small and metallic. Emma stepped back, her eyes scanning the alley below. A soft clink echoed down the fire escape. She descended, and at the bottom, lying in the gutter, was a child's bracelet, the plastic kind given out at hospitals. The faded initials were barely visible. RS. Emma stared at it, her breath shallow. It had to be Ruth's. Or maybe it was hers. Why would someone drop this? Why would they hide? Back at the house, Margaret was having a lucid moment. She was sitting on the porch, humming the same carousel tune from their day in the park. Emma sat beside her, the bracelet clutched in her fist. "You lied," she said. "Ruth didn't die. You saw her again." Margaret didn't deny it, her eyes glistened. "She said you'd find her. When it was time." Emma's hands trembled. "Why now? Why is it suddenly time?" Margaret leaned in, her whisper barely audible. "Because someone else is looking for you too." Emma hadn't been back to the park in over 20 years. Not since the day she and Margaret had danced in the fountain, spun on the carousel, and shared that fateful sticky cone of ice cream that had become the cornerstone of every happy memory she'd ever had. But now the park felt different. Smaller. Still. As if it were holding its breath. She wandered past the carousel, which creaked with rusted charm. The painted horses faded and chipped. The same tune, off-key and slow, tinkled from the speakers. The same as always. Just like that day. Except now, everything felt like a set built for a performance she no longer believed in. Emma turned toward the path that curved through the flower garden, her footsteps cautious. She didn't know what she was looking for. Maybe a memory to ground her, maybe a ghost. Instead, she found a man. He was sitting on a bench across the walkway, reading a newspaper. At first, he seemed ordinary. Mid-50s, gray around the temples, dark overcoat despite the warm weather. But when Emma slowed, something about him raised every hair on her arms. She knew that face, not personally, but from somewhere deep in her childhood. A photo? No, photos. Emma turned away quickly, pretending to fix her scarf, and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through the digitized images she'd taken from Margaret's old albums. There he was, in the background of 3 different shots. Once at a school play, once at a fair, once in the yard of their old home. Never central, always blurred, watching. Now he was watching again. She spun back around, phone in hand, heart pounding, but the man was gone. Only the newspaper remained, folded neatly on the bench. Emma rushed to it, scanning the pages, nothing unusual, until she reached the classifieds. One ad had been circled in red ink. Seeking lost family, initials RS and ER. "Please come home. Time is running out." Emma's throat tightened. She turned the page. And something slipped out from between the sheets. A bracelet. Child-sized. Familiar. It was the same as the one she'd found near the community center. Only this one bore different initials. ER. Her hands trembled, matching bracelets. One marked for her. One for Ruth. Why were they being left for her now? And, more importantly, by who? Later that day, Emma returned home and pulled out the shoebox of childhood photos she hadn't looked at in years. She laid them out on the kitchen table, searching the backgrounds. The man was there more than she remembered. At birthdays, school events, even in the blurry corner of a Christmas morning snapshot. She ran them through facial recognition software on her laptop, hoping for a match. Nothing. No name. No record. It was as if he'd never existed. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her heart race. Around 3 a.m., she went back to the park. The carousel was off. The park was empty. Except it wasn't. A figure stood near the fountain. Just beyond the reach of the streetlight, Emma froze. "Who are you?" No answer. She stepped closer. "Why were you watching me all those years? What do you want?" The figure didn't move. But slowly, a hand emerged from his coat. and dropped something onto the bench. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. Emma rushed forward and found a small leather notebook. She flipped it open and saw sketches. Drawings of her. As a child. At different ages. Some in color, some shaded in charcoal. All hauntingly accurate. In the back, a single page stood out. A family tree. Incomplete. Her name, Emma, sat at the top, but beneath it were 2 branches labeled only Mother, confirmed deceased, and Father, status unknown. A third line connected to a question mark and the words, Custodial transfer, Operation Firebird. Emma's pulse spiked. Firebird. It had to be related to the fire at St. Elora. A code name? A mission? A cover-up? She scanned further. A note had been scribbled hastily in red ink. Target compromised. Subject, Eve removed. Phoenix retrieval failed. Ruth S. presumed dead, but may have defected. Emma staggered back, as if the bench had burned her. This wasn't just someone watching her. This was someone tracking her. Someone who knew everything. Someone who may have been protecting her or surveilling her for years. At home, she confronted Margaret again, but her mother had retreated into a fog of confusion. She only repeated one phrase over and over. The Phoenix never forgets. The Phoenix never forgives. Emma returned to her laptop and searched for the phrase online. After endless scrolling through folklore and tattoo sites, one result appeared, a defunct forum for conspiracy theorists. Buried in a 12-year-old thread titled Secret Societies and Child Disappearances, one name stood out, the Phoenix Society, and then another, Operation Firebird. And below it, a chilling final comment. They place the children like seeds. Some are meant to grow, some are meant to burn. Margaret had good days and bad days now. On the bad days, she forgot Emma's name and called her Little Bird. On the good days, she sat in the kitchen with tea and an old radio, humming along to 1940s ballads and pretending nothing had changed. Today started as a good day, but Emma was ready to turn it into something else, something real. She sat across from Margaret, the leather notebook the man had left in the park sitting between them. I know about Operation Firebird, Emma said softly. Margaret didn't flinch. I know about the Phoenix Society, about Ruth Salazar, about the orphanage. Silence. Then Margaret looked out the window, the way she always did when hiding from truth. I loved you, she said. I need you to remember that first. Emma reached across the table. Then tell me the truth, please. Margaret's hand trembled as it wrapped around her teacup. You weren't supposed to survive, she said finally. None of the children were. The Phoenix Society wanted clean slates, no ties, no history. The fire was a cover-up and an extermination. Emma's breath caught in her throat. You're saying they started the fire? Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening. St. Elora wasn't just an orphanage. It was a sorting ground. They kept records on the children, classified them. Those with potential were marked for placement into high-value families. The rest... She didn't finish. Emma leaned back, her mind racing. And Ruth? What was her role? Margaret hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small, tattered envelope. Inside was a photograph of a younger Margaret and another woman, strong, sharp-eyed, unmistakably the same woman from the blurry Polaroid with toddler Emma Ruth. We were placed together, Margaret said. Both of us were society recruits, chosen to raise a child from the ashes of that fire. Your file was different. You had parents, real parents, who were part of the society, but they tried to defect. They wanted to take the truth public. The society made an example of them. Emma stared at the photo. So they were killed. Margaret's lips pressed together. There was an accident. That's what they called it. A car crash, though no bodies were ever recovered. Convenient, isn't it? She looked up, and for the first time in days, her gaze was sharp. They told us you died in the fire, that Ruth was burned trying to rescue you and didn't make it. But I found her a week later, alive, hiding in the basement of a safe house. And you were there, wrapped in a phoenix-marked blanket, crying. She handed you to me and told me to run. Emma's throat tightened. Why you? Because I had nothing left to lose, Margaret whispered. They'd already taken everything from me. I wasn't even supposed to be a caretaker anymore. I'd broken too many rules. But Ruth trusted me. She gave me one instruction: keep her hidden, at all costs. Emma shook her head. And you just disappeared? Margaret smiled bitterly. You don't vanish from the Phoenix Society. You bury yourself beneath lies. I changed our names, destroyed your records, kept you moving every few years, but I was never truly free. They've been watching, waiting for you to surface. Emma leaned forward. Why now? Why are they coming back? Margaret's voice lowered. Because someone wants to claim you. What do you mean, claim? You were a legacy child, Margaret said. Your real parents weren't just defectors. They were high-ranking. That trust fund you discovered? It wasn't just inheritance. It was leverage, power. The society uses legacy placements to control their most dangerous secrets. Whoever controls you controls the truth. Emma's heart pounded. That's why someone accessed my medical records. That's why I've been followed. She pulled out the child's bracelet RS and laid it beside the notebook. She's still alive, isn't she? Emma asked. Ruth, Margaret looked down at the bracelet. If she is, she won't stay hidden for much longer, not with the society this close. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Then again. The old house groaned as if something moved through its bones. Emma stood, alert. Did you hear that? Margaret didn't answer. She stared toward the hallway, eyes wide with something between fear and recognition. They've found us, she whispered. Emma dashed to the front door and peered through the peephole. A black car sat idling at the end of the driveway. Emma turned back. We have to go. Margaret shook her head. No, I won't run again. You have to, Emma pleaded. You can't stay here. But Margaret's face had gone still, calm. I've made my choices. Now you must make yours. Emma hesitated, then rushed to the back of the house and retrieved the metal box, the one that had started it all. She added the notebook, the bracelet, the photo. Every secret now gathered into one place. When she returned to the living room, Margaret pressed something into her palm. A key. To a storage unit in Bellamy. Ruth left it with me. She said one day you'd need it. Outside, the car door opened. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Margaret smiled softly. Go now, my little bird. And don't come back until you've burned the whole damn nest down. Emma didn't look back. As the dark car crept up the driveway and shadows shifted behind the curtains of her childhood home, she slipped away into the night with the shoebox of secrets clutched under her arm and a single destination in mind, Bellamy. It was a nowhere town, population, cornfields and secrets, the kind of place Margaret used to call quiet enough to forget yourself. Now Emma understood what that really meant. She drove through its ghostly streets at dawn, scanning faded street signs until she found the storage facility. Unit 47. The key slid in with a metallic sigh, and the door rolled up to reveal almost nothing. Dust. Cobwebs. A rocking chair. But beneath a tarp in the corner sat a locked trunk with a tag marked simply, R. Salazar. Emma pried it open. Inside were dozens of journals, tape recordings labeled in red ink, and stacks of documents tied together with string. And at the very bottom, wrapped in plastic and sealed like a crime scene, a Phoenix Society dossier labeled Operation Firebird, Archive ER, -319. Emma sat cross-legged on the cold floor and began to read. The files were methodical, clinical. Ruth had stolen them before disappearing. Every page was a revelation. Subject ER exhibits accelerated pattern recognition and emotional intelligence. Recommend placement in Tier 1 legacy program. There were notes from someone named Director Voss, detailing, quote, conditioning practices, psychological monitoring, and family placements designed to maximize ideological loyalty. Emma's stomach turned as she read her name, over and over, reduced to a case number. But then came a shocking twist. In one of Ruth's handwritten notes tucked between the pages, a line was underlined 3 times. "I am not her mother, but I will be her protector." Emma blinked. Hadn't Margaret said Ruth might have been her biological mother? Why would Ruth lie in her private notes? Or had Margaret been the one who was wrong? As Emma listened to one of the tapes, Ruth's voice crackled to life. They killed her parents. They tried to rewrite Emma into their narrative. But I won't let them. She was never meant to be one of them. And neither was I. Emma's hands shook. It wasn't just about her. Ruth had defected. She'd betrayed the society to save Emma, but also to expose something far bigger. Another document included a map, lines and pins connecting St. Elora Orphanage to locations across the country. Safe houses, foster homes, hospitals, all with the Phoenix crest hidden in the margins. One location stood out, a clinic in Chicago labeled DNA Holding Burn Archive. Burn Archive? Her mind reeled. Could this be where the society had stored falsified or destroyed identities? Could her real identity be in there? Before she could process it further, her phone rang. "Unknown number," she answered. A woman's voice. "If you're reading this, they know. Leave Bellamy. Don't go to the clinic. It's compromised." "Who is this?" Emma asked. The voice hesitated. "An old friend of Margaret's. The woman she couldn't save. But I'm not dead yet." The line went dead. Emma's blood turned to ice. Was it Ruth? Later that day, while trying to arrange the files in some logical order, a knock came at the door of her motel. No one should have known she was there. She peered through the peephole. Just a package. No note. She opened the door, grabbed the box, and locked the door again. Inside was a manila folder and a burner phone. The folder contained court documents, sealed birth records, medical reports, and a shocking detail: a blood test from when Emma was a baby. A match to 2 people, listed as next of kin, Julian and Celia Rothwell. Philanthropists. Humanitarian activists. Deceased in a car explosion 2 days after the St. Elora fire. Emma's heart sank. Her real name wasn't Emma, it was Eleanor Rothwell. And she hadn't just been smuggled away from danger, she'd been stolen from a family that had tried to blow the whistle on the Phoenix Society. She was the last piece of a scandal buried 3 decades deep. Her phone buzzed again. The burner. A text appeared. "They're watching you now. Leave tonight. And when you're ready, come find me. R." She looked outside. Across the street, a black SUV idled near the gas station. The same one from her mother's driveway? Emma had to move. Fast. She packed the documents, the tapes, and the bracelet marked RS into her bag, then opened the motel's rear window and climbed out into the alley. As she disappeared into the darkness, one last twist surfaced in her mind, something she hadn't dared think before. If the society wanted her back so badly, if they'd waited this long for her to resurface, then maybe they didn't just want to silence her, maybe they needed her for something bigger. And maybe the final betrayal hadn't happened yet. Emma Rothwell. The name felt foreign in her mouth, like an identity tried on in someone else's mirror. And yet, as she stared at the bloodwork Ruth had hidden, the truth stared back. Her life was a lie, one meticulously curated, buried beneath false paperwork and years of manipulation. She wasn't just another stolen child. She was the child the Phoenix Society had fought hardest to erase. The daughter of Julian and Celia Rothwell, global philanthropists who, according to the public narrative, died in a tragic accident shortly after donating to the orphanage at St. Elora. But the private files Ruth had stolen, and Margaret had protected, told a far more sinister story. They hadn't died because of a crash, they were assassinated. Emma sat in the back room of a tiny library in Fremont, another one of Ruth's safe places, marked on the hidden map, waiting for the DNA test she'd mailed in under the alias Eleanor Grant to return. She hadn't expected anything earth-shattering, but when the results came in, they detonated everything. 99.9% match to Julian and Celia Rothwell. Both listed as deceased, both listed as beneficiaries of a sealed multi-million-dollar trust. And now? Emma Rothwell, sole surviving heir. Attached was a single-line note from the legal firm handling the dormant trust. An inquiry has recently been made on your behalf. Please contact us immediately to verify identity and secure assets. Emma's blood ran cold. She hadn't contacted them. Someone else had. Someone knew who she really was, before she did. She flew to New York under a fake name and met with the attorney listed, a gaunt man named Calloway with paper-thin skin and sad eyes. "We've waited a long time for you, Miss Rothwell," he said, sliding a black binder across the table. "Your parents left this for you. It was never meant to be opened unless something terrible happened." Inside was a letter, yellowed and delicate. "If you're reading this, it means the Phoenix Society succeeded in silencing us, but not in erasing you. You were always the key. They feared what you might remember, what you might discover. But most of all, they feared what you might become. Do not trust anyone who claims to protect you. Not without proof, especially not those closest to you." Emma stared at the underlined sentence, her throat tight. Who were her parents warning her about? And what could be closer than Margaret? Later that night, as Emma sat in a quiet hotel room flipping through legal jargon and financial statements, a knock rattled the door. She didn't answer. The knock came again. She crept to the peephole. No one. But on the floor, someone had slid an envelope beneath the door. Inside, an unmarked USB drive and a handwritten message. "The truth isn't in your blood. It's in your memory. Watch this." Emma plugged the drive into her laptop. A grainy video played. It was surveillance footage, black and white, time-stamped 1996. A nursery room. Cribs. Then the camera panned to a woman. Margaret. Younger, nervous, pacing. Suddenly, another figure entered the frame. A man in a suit. Emma's stomach turned. She'd seen him once before, in the background of her childhood photos, the man in the park. He leaned over her crib, and whispered something to Margaret, then handed her a manila envelope. She took the baby, she took Emma, and walked out. But it wasn't a rescue. It was a transaction. A chill swept over Emma. Was Margaret part of it from the beginning? Had she lied about everything? Had Ruth too? Her phone buzzed. Another burner text. The man from the footage? He's not just a Phoenix member, he's your godfather, appointed by the society. And he's still alive. Emma's breath caught. Godfather. Another hand in the lie. The message continued. His name is Victor Lang. He was your parents' friend before they turned. He's the one who brokered your disappearance. He's still working for them, and he's the one who's been following you. Emma scrambled through the documents Calloway had given her, fingers trembling. Among the beneficiary files was a trustee's name, Victor Lang. He was the executor of her trust. The society had embedded one of their own inside her inheritance. Her entire fortune, her future, was being controlled by the same people who had murdered her family and stolen her identity. She was living inside a web they'd spun for 30 years, and now she was the spider's final prey. By morning, Emma had a plan. She booked a flight to California under the alias Eleanor R. Grayson. But she didn't go to the airport. Instead, she headed to an address scribbled in Ruth's journal, one of the last safe houses with an X over it, implying danger. She had to risk it. She needed someone outside the web. Someone honest. When she arrived, the house was abandoned, except for a single item left on the kitchen table. A baby blanket, burned at the edges, embroidered with a phoenix in red thread. And a note, "If you want the full truth, come alone. Ruth is alive, and she's waiting." Emma stepped back, heart racing. The fire that had taken her parents, the society that still hunted her, the woman who had raised her, and the woman who had saved her, all of it was converging. And somewhere in the ashes of betrayal, she finally knew what she had to do. She had to find Ruth. She had to face Margaret. and she had to burn the Phoenix Society to the ground. Emma didn't sleep. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor of the safe house, the burned baby blanket in her lap, its Phoenix emblem staring back at her like a dare. The note claiming Ruth was alive echoed in her head. She had no proof, only whispers and riddles, but Emma had stopped waiting for proof. Now she chased ghosts. By dawn, she was back in New York, but not at the lawyer's office. She went to the address listed on Victor Lang's most recent trust correspondence. It led her to a historic building in the Upper East Side, innocuous on the outside, but its doors were guarded, and surveillance cameras buzzed quietly above. No signage. No tenants listed. She posed as a courier and slipped inside when the guard opened the door for a woman in a power suit. Past the marble lobby, a brass plaque beside a private elevator read, Phoenix Foundation, Restoration 1956. She stared at the emblem, a red phoenix, wings unfurled, clutching a serpent in its talons. The elevator required a key card, but she wasn't there to go up. She ducked into a stairwell, climbed 3 floors, and cracked open the hallway door, just enough to peek. Victor Lang was there, older than she remembered, silver-haired, with a stillness to him that made her skin crawl. He walked with a woman in a gray dress, her voice clipped, emotionless. "We've waited long enough," the woman said. "The board wants her brought in." Victor replied, "She's been activated. The moment she accessed the trust, we owned her." Emma's stomach dropped. Activated? She turned to slip away, but heard the woman continue. "She's not just the Rothwell girl anymore. She's proof the legacy program works. If she survives this next phase, we can relaunch publicly. She'll be the face of the society." Face of the society. Emma stumbled down the stairs shaking. Her life, every memory, every trauma, had been a petri dish for these people. The society hadn't just stolen her from her family. They'd turned her into an experiment. Outside, her phone buzzed again. A burner number. One word, run. That night, in a new safe house Ruth had marked in her journal, Emma found another cassette, this one labeled Phase 2 ER. She played it. Ruth's voice, urgent. "They've been grooming you, Emma, not just to forget, but to belong. Margaret shielded you, but they knew what you were. They called you the Phoenix Child. They think your bloodline makes you worthy, that you're theirs by design." Then, another voice, distorted, male. "Reintegration begins at 30, memory sync expected. Assets secured, resistance is a variable." Emma yanked the tape out. Reintegration, memory sync. They weren't just watching her, they were waiting for her to become something, someone. She pulled up the files again, the Project Firebird dossier. According to Society notes, Phoenix children weren't just orphans. They were handpicked, not just for adoption but for future influence. Politics, finance, tech. Weapons of legacy. Emma flipped to the names in the placement list. 2 leapt out. Daniel Voss, placed, 1991. Senator's aide. Lillian Hart, placed, 1993. Biofarm CEO. There were dozens more. Emma recognized at least 5 names from high-profile interviews, TED Talks, Forbes lists. They were everywhere. Hidden in plain sight. Children, like her, molded by the society to rise into power, and she had been meant to lead them. That's what the trust fund was for, not inheritance, investment. Then came another twist. Emma hacked into the private server of the Phoenix Foundation using credentials Ruth had scribbled in a notebook. She found a confidential file titled Reclamation Protocol, Subject ER. It was dated 3 weeks ago, right before she recreated the childhood day with Margaret. The file detailed plans to, quote, reinsert Emma Rothwell into the Phoenix ecosystem through controlled emotional stimulation and legacy retrieval triggers. In layman's terms, they'd orchestrated the carousel day. They'd known it was her most vulnerable memory, likely implanted through repeated exposure as a child, and they'd subtly manipulated it to awaken something in her. The music, the man in the park, even Margaret's sudden lucidity. It hadn't been fate, it had been a psychological ignition. Emma felt sick. The only real moment she thought she had left, the day that started it all, had been manufactured. Tears burned her eyes. She wanted to destroy everything. Just then, another message appeared on her burner. "It's time. Meet me at the greenhouse. You remember the one." Emma did remember. It was a crumbling glass structure behind the old conservatory in Bellamy. Margaret used to take her there when she was little. It was where she taught her to dance barefoot in the dirt. It had always felt like a safe place. But now she saw it for what it was, a hiding place for ghosts. She packed the tapes, the files, the blanket, and the burner phone. Then she whispered to herself, "I'm not their weapon. I'm their reckoning." The greenhouse was overgrown and silent, as if nature had tried to bury its secrets beneath ivy and rot. Moonlight filtered through broken panes of glass, casting jagged shadows across the floor, where cracked flower pots and rusted tools lay like bones. Emma stepped inside, every sense on high alert. Then she heard it, movement, slow, purposeful. "Emma," a voice called softly. She turned. A figure emerged from behind a veil of hanging vines. It was her, Ruth Salazar. Older, her once severe features softened by time and hardship. Her eyes, those same sharp, watchful eyes from Emma's half-buried memories, glimmered with something that stopped Emma cold. Recognition. "Ruth," Emma whispered, "you're alive." "I had to disappear," Ruth said, stepping closer. "They thought I died in the fire. That was the only way to keep you safe." Emma clutched the burned baby blanket tighter. "Why now? Why reveal yourself after all this time?" Ruth hesitated, then pulled a photo from her coat. A Polaroid, yellowed at the corners. It was Emma, a baby in a hospital bassinet. Beside her stood a smiling couple. Not Margaret. And not Ruth. "I knew your parents," Ruth said. Julian and Celia weren't just donors to St. Alora's. They infiltrated the Phoenix Society to expose it. They were insiders, whistleblowers. And they died trying to protect you. Emma's breath caught. "They were murdered," she said quietly. "I read the file. But Margaret told me she stole me from the orphanage. That she saved me." Ruth nodded grimly. "That's the lie the society wanted you to believe." She reached into her coat again and pulled out a flash drive. "Here's the truth." On a bench surrounded by decaying flower beds, Emma watched as video footage played on Ruth's cracked tablet. It was a covert recording, grainy, time-stamped the night of the fire. A young Ruth stood with Julian and Celia Rothwell outside a back door to the orphanage. Julian was frantic, holding baby Emma in his arms. "They found out," Julian said. "We need to get her out of here. She's already been tagged." Celia pressed a kiss to baby Emma's forehead. "If anything happens to us..." Then, from the shadows, a third figure stepped out. Margaret. Not frantic, not panicked, calm. "I'll take her," she said. "They trust me. I can disappear." Celia hesitated. "Are you sure? After everything?" Margaret nodded. "For her, yes. I'll raise her as mine. No one will ever know." Then, in a voice laced with finality, "They won't stop until they get her back." The footage ended. Emma sat frozen. So it had all been true. And not true. Margaret hadn't stolen her. She had been entrusted with her. "Your parents made Margaret promise," Ruth said. "They knew the society would try to erase the truth. Margaret was the only one who could vanish without question." Emma shook her head, overwhelmed. "So, she wasn't lying, not completely." "No," Ruth said. "But she left out the part where she was once part of the society. A handler, a recruiter. She left them for you. She betrayed them." Emma's eyes stung. All the questions, the doubts, the fractured loyalty. It all came rushing in. "They think I belong to them," she said, "that I'm part of some legacy." "You are," Ruth said. "But not the way they think." She handed Emma a folder labeled Phoenix Redacted. Inside, photographs of other Phoenix children, some alive, some missing, some marked deceased. Each one carefully placed in high-powered families, each with suspicious deaths in their wake. "They used these children as currency," Ruth explained. "To buy influence, loyalty. Emma, you were their crown jewel. The Rothwells were well known, beloved. You were meant to be raised as a society figurehead. Your parents ruined that plan." Emma stared at the names, the dates. These weren't accidents. These were executions in slow motion. "Why me?" she asked. Ruth looked her dead in the eyes. "Because your parents created the failsafe," Emma blinked. "What failsafe?" Ruth smiled faintly. "You." She explained that Julian and Celia designed a hidden archive of every name, every transaction, every secret the society ever buried, coded and fragmented across multiple locations. Access required a biometric key, a retinal scan, and blood confirmation, both of which only Emma could provide. "You are the lock and the key," Ruth said. "And that's why they want you back. Or dead." Emma stood, the folder clutched in her hands. "I'm done running," she said. "If this archive exists, I'm going to find it. And I'm going to bring them down." Ruth touched her arm. "There's something else." She pulled out a cell phone and played a voicemail. It was distorted, broken by static, but unmistakable. Margaret's voice. "They know. I didn't tell them where you are, but they're closing in. Emma, you have to choose. Tell them what they want and live, or expose them and watch everything we built burn." Emma's throat tightened. The society was readying its final move. She looked at Ruth. "We have to get to the archive." "It's in Geneva," Ruth said. "Your parents had a private vault beneath the Rothwell Foundation. It's still intact. But getting in means walking into the lion's den." Emma didn't flinch. "Then we walk in with fire." Ruth reached into her coat one last time and handed Emma a silver key. Time to finish what they started. Snow drifted softly through the narrow streets of Geneva as Emma stood before the Rothwell Foundation, a modern marble and glass monument to the legacy of philanthropists the world never knew were murdered. The building shimmered under floodlights, cold and beautiful. It was also a tomb. Beneath it, her parents' last secret waited. Ruth stood beside her, bundled in a long gray coat, eyes on the cameras mounted to the side of the building. "They know we're here. We won't get a second chance." "I don't need one," Emma replied. They entered using the silver key and retina scan from her father's old briefcase. A hidden elevator behind a false wall hummed to life, descending into the earth. As they dropped deeper, Ruth handed Emma a final folder, thin but heavy with meaning. "If anything happens to me," she said, "this goes to the press. Multiple outlets. Anonymous. Simultaneous drop." Emma nodded and slipped it into her coat. The elevator doors opened to a private vault. Inside, dim lights flickered on to reveal a room built like a data fortress, rows of cold servers encased in reinforced glass, humming with dormant power. Ruth moved quickly, typing in passcodes only she and Julian had ever known. Emma placed her hand on the biometric pad, and the central system surged to life. A projection lit up, the Phoenix file. "What is this?" Emma asked. "Everything," Ruth said. "Child transfers, offshore accounts, government bribes. The Phoenix Society's entire network, from inception to now." On screen, faces flickered. Judges, CEOs, media moguls. Emma felt bile rise in her throat. And then it happened. The vault doors behind them slammed shut. The lights dimmed. A siren, a low, rolling tone, pierced the silence. "They found us," Ruth whispered. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Victor Lang. "You really thought it would end here?" he asked, calm as ever. Emma stepped forward. "You turned children into tools. You killed my parents. And you nearly destroyed the only person who ever truly loved me." Victor gave a soft smile. "And yet, here you are, standing over the very weapon they built to destroy us. You have two choices, Emma. Shut it down and join us. Or press that button and become the most hunted woman in the world." Emma looked at the console. Activate dump. Public release, cancel dump, return to vault. Behind her, Ruth's eyes were pleading. "Do it, Emma. Expose them." Victor stepped closer. "Margaret will die if you do. We have her. She's alive. For now." Emma's heart seized. "I'll let her go," Victor said, voice oily. "You'll never hear from us again. Walk away, and you can protect the woman who raised you. Stay, and her blood's on your hands." Emma turned to Ruth. "Is it true?" Ruth nodded, her voice shaking. Yes. She's their leverage. Victor's voice turned venomous. She lied to you your entire life. She kept you in a fantasy. But she gave me love, Emma spat, which is more than you ever will. A moment passed in breathless silence. Then Ruth stepped forward, slipping something into Emma's hand. It was Margaret's locket, charred at the edges. Inside, a photo. Emma as a baby, and Margaret crying, cradling her like a lifeline. She loved you, Ruth whispered. In her own, flawed, desperate way. Victor raised a hand, signaling security through his earpiece. Time's up, Emma. Emma looked at the screen one last time and made her choice. She slammed the activate dump button. The system flared to life. Data streamed across global channels. Servers lit up like firecrackers. Email inboxes, newsrooms, courts. All of them were now ticking time bombs. Victor lunged toward the console, but Ruth tackled him. Go! She shouted. Emma ran. Sirens blared through the vault. Automated lockdowns initiated. Steel grates dropped behind her as she bolted up the stairs, bypassing the sealed elevator. She didn't stop until she burst into the Geneva night. Across the city, her phone buzzed furiously. News alerts, messages, reporters calling. The world had seen the truth. She turned on the first newsfeed. Breaking, global child trafficking ring exposed. Phoenix society leak tied to high-ranking officials. Margaret. Emma didn't even realize she was crying until she answered a call from an unknown number. A voice, a woman's, groggy and shaken, whispered, Emma? Mom? She gasped. I'm safe, Margaret said. They let me go. You did it. Emma sank to the curb, the locket clutched in her hand. I had to. A pause. You did the right thing, Margaret whispered. Then, silence. A final shot cuts to Emma days later, standing behind a podium. Cameras, flash. Reporters crowd the steps of a courthouse. She's clean-cut now, composed. But beneath her eyes is a storm of grief, fury, and truth. She looks out at the world that now knows her name. And just before she speaks, fade to black.